My name is Ladea. I'm 20 years old. The night my family threw me out of the house, the rain was falling so hard it felt like the sky itself wanted to erase me. I stood on the front porch with my small backpack in my hand, watching the only home I had ever known slowly close its doors on me. And the worst part? No one even asked for my side of the story. My sister was crying behind my parents, her face buried in my mother's shoulder, pretending to be the victim. And my parents believed every single tear. My father didn't even look at me when he said the words that shattered my entire life. Get out. Just like that. 20 years of being their daughter erased in less than 10 seconds. I tried to speak. I tried to explain, but every word I said only made my sister cry harder. And the more she cried, the more my parents looked at me like I was a stranger. So they pushed me outside, locked the door, and left me standing there in the storm, alone. But what they didn't know that night was that someone else had seen everything. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who was about to expose the lie that destroyed my life. And when that truth finally came out, my parents didn't just regret their decision, they begged me to come back. But by then, it was already too late. Before I tell you what really happened that night, tell me something. Where are you watching this story from? And what time is it in your country right now? I always love knowing where my story family is listening from. And if you enjoy emotional stories about betrayal, revenge, and truth finally winning, please hit the subscribe button and join this journey with me, because this story is one you will never forget. And this is the story of how my own family chose my sister's lies over me, and how the truth destroyed everything they believed. And the story I'm about to tell you started long before the night my parents threw me out of the house. Because the truth is, families don't suddenly break in one moment. They crack slowly, quietly. And sometimes you don't even realize how broken things are until it's too late. Growing up, my house always looked perfect from the outside. We lived in a clean, two-story home in a quiet neighborhood. My parents were respected. Our relatives often said we were a lucky family. But inside those walls, things were very different. Because in my family, there were always two daughters, one who could do no wrong, and one who was always somehow wrong. My older sister had always been the favorite. She was beautiful in the way people noticed immediately. Soft voice, gentle smile, long hair that everyone loved complimenting. Whenever relatives visited, they always pulled her close and praised her. She's such a sweet girl. She's so polite. You must be very proud of her. And my parents always smiled proudly when they heard those things. But when the attention moved to me, the reactions were different. I was quieter. Not shy, exactly, just someone who preferred observing rather than talking all the time. But in my house, quietness was often mistaken for attitude. If I stayed silent during family conversations, my mother would say I was being disrespectful. If I tried to explain something, my father would accuse me of arguing. So slowly, I learned something important. No matter what I did, it would somehow be wrong. My sister understood this dynamic very well. At first, when we were little, she was actually kind to me. She used to braid my hair, help me with homework, and sometimes even defend me when our parents were angry. But as we grew older, something changed. I started noticing small things, little lies, tiny manipulations, situations where she would twist events just enough so that I looked like the bad one. For example, if she broke something in the kitchen, she would act shocked and say she had found it like that. Then she would casually mention that I had been there earlier. My parents would immediately turn to me. Why can't you be more careful? At first, I tried explaining, but explanations only made things worse, because my sister had one powerful weapon: tears. The moment she cried, everything changed. My parents instantly softened toward her and hardened toward me. If she cried, it meant she was hurt. And if she was hurt, someone must have caused it. And somehow that someone was always me. I don't know exactly when she realized how powerful that was, but once she did, she used it often. By the time we reached our teenage years, the pattern became almost predictable. Something would happen, my sister would cry, my parents would blame me, and I would stand there trying to explain myself while feeling like my words were invisible. Eventually, I stopped trying so hard, because when you repeat the same truth again and again and no one listens, you start wondering if silence might hurt less. But the real problems started when we entered college. My sister had a personality that loved attention. She liked being admired, being talked about, being the center of every conversation. She dressed beautifully, posted pictures constantly, and had a large circle of friends. People always told her how amazing she was. But attention can be addictive. And sometimes when attention fades, people tried to create it again. That's when I started hearing strange things from relatives and neighbors, comments that confused me. One aunt once pulled me aside during a family gathering and asked me softly, "Why are you jealous of your sister?" I was shocked. Jealous? Of what? She looked uncomfortable. Well, she said you don't like when people praise her. I felt a strange knot tighten in my chest, because I had never said anything like that. Not once. Then another time, a cousin asked me why I always spoke badly about my sister behind her back. Again, something I had never done. Slowly, I realized something disturbing. My sister had been quietly creating a story about me, a story where I was the jealous younger sister who hated her success. And the worst part? People believed it. Because she always told those stories with the same sad expression, the same watery eyes, the same fragile voice. Even I almost believed her sometimes. But despite all of this, I never imagined things would reach the point they did. Because lies are like snowballs rolling down a hill. They start small, then they grow and grow, until one day they crash into something and destroy everything in their path. That day came on a cold evening. I had just finished my classes and returned home. The house felt strangely quiet when I walked inside. Normally, my mother would be in the kitchen and my sister would be on the phone with friends. But that evening, the living room lights were on, and all three of them were sitting there. My sister was crying, my mother was holding her, and my father looked furious. The moment I stepped into the room, the air felt heavy. Something was terribly wrong. My father looked at me with a cold expression I'd never seen before. "Where were you?" he asked sharply. "At college," I replied, confused. My sister suddenly cried louder. My mother glared at me. "How could you still pretend you did nothing?" My heart started pounding. "I don't understand. What happened?" My sister slowly lifted her face from my mother's shoulder. Her eyes were red and swollen. But the moment she looked at me, something flashed in them. Something that didn't look like sadness. It looked like calculation. Then she said the words that would destroy everything. She told everyone my secrets. The room fell silent. I stared at her in disbelief. "What secrets?" My sister's voice trembled. "The things I trusted you with, the things about my personal life you told people just to humiliate me." My mind went blank. I had never done that, not once. But before I could even defend myself, my father slammed his hand on the table. How could you do something so disgusting to your own sister? I didn't. Enough. His voice thundered through the house. My mother shook her head in disappointment. I never thought you'd sink this low. My sister buried her face and sobbed harder. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They had already decided I was guilty. No evidence, no questions, just her tears against my silence. And the worst part? That was only the beginning, because what happened next was the moment my parents made a decision they would regret for the rest of their lives.
The moment my father shouted at me, the entire house felt different. It was like I was no longer their daughter, just an unwanted stranger standing in their living room. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I looked at my sister, hoping, just for a second, that she would stop the lie, that she would say something like, "Wait, maybe it was a misunderstanding." But she didn't. Instead, she cried even harder, and every tear she dropped felt like another nail sealing my fate. My mother tightened her arms around her and looked at me with disappointment. "I trusted you," she said quietly. That sentence hurt more than my father's shouting, because I had spent my entire life trying to earn that trust. But now, it felt like it had never existed. "I didn't tell anyone anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My father scoffed. "So now you're calling your sister a liar?" "That's not what I'm saying," I replied quickly. "Then explain why 3 of her friends called her today asking about those personal things you spread." My mind froze. 3 friends? I didn't even know what secrets they were talking about. "I swear I didn't say anything," I insisted. But the more I defended myself, the more frustrated my father became. "You're still lying." "I'm not lying." My voice cracked for the first time. That small crack seemed to confirm everything they already believed. My sister whispered through her tears, "I told you not to tell anyone. I trusted you." My mother's face hardened. "How could you betray your own sister like that?" I felt like the room was spinning. "I never betrayed her." But my words sounded weak, even to me, because the truth is useless when no one wants to hear it. My father took a step closer. His eyes were filled with anger. "You warned me many times about your attitude." "What attitude?" I asked, shocked. "Your jealousy." That word hit me like a slap. Jealousy. That was the story my sister had been building for years, and now it had finally worked. "I'm not jealous of her," I whispered, but my father shook his head. "You couldn't stand seeing people admire your sister, so you tried to ruin her reputation." "That's not true." My sister suddenly spoke again. Her voice was fragile and shaking. "I never wanted to tell them, but she's always hated me." My chest tightened. Hated her? The girl I used to help with assignments, the girl whose secrets I had always protected. But none of that mattered now. My mother looked at me with a cold expression. "Your sister has always supported you, and this is how you repay her?" I wanted to scream, to shake them, to force them to listen. But instead, I stood there, feeling smaller with every second. "Please," I said quietly, "just ask me what actually happened." My father laughed bitterly. "We already know what happened." My sister cried again. "I just wanted to trust my own sister." And that was the final push. My father pointed toward the front door. "Get out." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "What?" "You heard me," he said coldly. "Leave this house." My stomach dropped. "You're serious?" My mother avoided my eyes. "We can't have someone like you under this roof right now." Someone like me? Their own daughter? I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to cry, because I knew exactly what tears meant in this house. They meant victory, and I wasn't going to give that to my sister. "You're throwing me out over something I didn't do?" I asked. My father crossed his arms. "Maybe some time away will teach you humility." My hands started shaking. Where am I supposed to go? "That's not our problem tonight." Those words cut deeper than anything else, because for the first time in my life, I realized something painful. Home was supposed to be the one place where people believed you, and mine had just turned into a courtroom where the verdict was already decided. My sister peeked at me from behind my mother's shoulder. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and in that moment, her crying stopped, just for 1 second, and I saw something terrifying in her eyes. Not sadness, not pain, satisfaction. Then she quickly hid her face again and continued sobbing. But that single second told me everything. This wasn't an accident, it was planned. My father grabbed my backpack from the chair and threw it toward me. "Take your things." The bag hit the floor near my feet. My entire life suddenly felt like it had been reduced to a small piece of luggage. I slowly picked it up. My legs felt heavy as I walked toward the door. Part of me still hoped someone would stop me, that my mother would suddenly say, "Wait, let's talk," that my father would calm down, that my sister would finally confess. But none of those things happened. Instead, my father opened the front door. Cold wind rushed inside. Rain was pouring outside. The storm had started while we were arguing. How fitting. I stepped onto the porch. The rain instantly soaked my clothes. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice. Maybe after she realizes her mistake, she'll apologize. I turned around slowly. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly, but my father had already begun closing the door. "Good night." The door slammed shut, and just like that, I was no longer part of that family. I stood outside in the rain, staring at the house where I had spent my entire life. The lights were still on, my family was still inside, but I had never felt more alone. What they didn't know, what none of them knew that night, was that someone else had seen something earlier that day. Someone who knew exactly what my sister had done. Someone who had the proof that would destroy her lie. But I wouldn't find that out until later, because that stormy night was only the beginning of everything that was about to change. The rain didn't stop. It kept pouring down like the sky had opened every cloud it had. Within seconds, my clothes were completely soaked. My hair stuck to my face and cold water slid down my back. But I didn't move. I just stood there on the porch, staring at the closed door, waiting for someone to open it, waiting for my father to come out and say he had lost his temper, waiting for my mother to realize something was wrong, waiting for my sister to finally admit the truth. But minutes passed, and nothing happened. Inside the house, the lights were still on. Shadows moved behind the curtains. They were continuing their evening, as if nothing had changed, as if their daughter wasn't standing outside in the middle of a storm. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. That was the moment reality finally hit me. They weren't coming. I was really alone. I slowly stepped down from the porch and walked toward the gate. The road outside our house was almost empty. Rainwater waved along the sides of the street like small rivers. My shoes were already filled with water. The cold air made my fingers numb. I hugged my backpack close to my chest, trying to protect the few things inside it. My phone, my wallet, and a small notebook I always carried. That was all I had with me. 20 years of life reduced to a single bag. I walked without thinking, letting the rain guide my steps. Street lights reflected on the wet pavement, making everything look blurry and distant. My mind replayed the scene in the living room again and again. My sister crying, my father shouting, my mother's disappointed voice, and the way the door had closed behind me. Every memory felt heavier than the rain falling on my shoulders. After about 15 minutes of walking, I reached a small bus stop near the corner of the main road. The roof above it gave a little protection from the rain. I sat down on the cold metal bench. My whole body was shaking. At first, I thought it was just the cold, but then I realized something else. I was shaking because I didn't know where to go. Most people at my age could call a friend, but I had never been the kind of person with many close friends. I had always focused on studying and staying away from drama, and now that quiet life had left me with very few options. I unlocked my phone. The screen glowed in the dark. For a long moment, I stared at my contacts list. Names scrolled past my eyes. Classmates, group project partners, some distant relatives. But none of them felt like someone I could call at midnight and say, "Hey, my family just threw me out of the house. Can I stay with you?" My throat tightened. I placed the phone back in my bag. The rain grew heavier. Cars occasionally passed on the road, their headlights cutting through the darkness for a few seconds before disappearing again. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stay warm. That's when I started thinking about my sister again, about that 1 second when our eyes met before I left, the moment when her crying had stopped and that strange look of satisfaction had appeared. The more I thought about it, the more it made my stomach twist, because it meant one thing. She wanted this. She wanted me out of the house. But why? That question echoed in my mind over and over. What did she gain from destroying my life like this? I had never competed with her, never tried to take anything away from her. So why did she hate me enough to lie like that? A sudden loud thunderclap shook the sky. I flinched slightly.
The wind grew stronger, pushing rain under the roof of the bus stop. Drops of water splashed onto my legs. I wiped my face, not sure whether the wetness there was rain or tears. Hours seemed to pass. The street became quieter. Most houses nearby had turned off their lights. Everyone else was asleep, safe inside warm homes, except me. At some point, exhaustion started creeping into my body. My head leaned back against the metal wall behind the bench. My eyelids felt heavy, but every time I started drifting off, the cold air woke me up again. Then suddenly, I heard the sound of a car slowing down. Headlights stopped near the bus stop. For a moment, fear ran through me. I straightened up and looked toward the road. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, wearing a dark jacket. The person walked closer under the streetlight, and when I finally saw their face clearly, my heart skipped a beat, because it was someone who wasn't supposed to be there, someone who looked at me with clear shock and concern. "Ledea?" the person said. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night in this storm?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could say anything, they asked a question that made my chest tighten again. "Did something happen at your house?" I didn't know it yet, but that unexpected meeting at the bus stop was the moment the truth about my sister's lie was finally going to start coming out. The person standing in front of me under the streetlight looked just as shocked as I felt. Rain continued falling around us, but for a moment, everything else faded away. "Ledea?" the voice repeated. It was my sister's close friend from college, someone who had visited our house many times before, someone who knew both of us. And judging by the confused expression on her face, she clearly hadn't expected to see me sitting alone at a bus stop in the middle of the night. "What are you doing here?" she asked again. I hesitated. For a few seconds, I considered lying, saying I was just waiting for someone. But the exhaustion in my body and the pain in my chest were too heavy to hide anything. "My parents kicked me out," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "What?" "They think I told people about my sister's secrets." The moment those words left my mouth, something strange happened. Instead of looking angry or disappointed, she looked shocked, completely shocked. "What are you talking about?" she said. I frowned. That's what my sister told them. The girl stared at me in disbelief. Then she said something that made my entire body go still. Ladea, you didn't tell anyone anything. My heart skipped. How do you know? She took a deep breath and looked extremely uncomfortable. Because your sister was the one telling people. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. What? She ran a hair through her wet hair. I didn't think it was serious at first. Earlier today, she was with a group of us at a cafe. She started talking about her personal life and sharing all those things herself. My mind struggled to process her words. She told everyone? Yes, but she accused me. That's why I'm shocked right now, the girl said quickly. After she left the cafe, she even joked that if her parents ever found out those things, she would just blame you because they always believe her anyway. The world around me suddenly felt very quiet. The rain, the wind, everything faded behind the weight of what I had just heard. So she planned it, I whispered. The girl looked guilty as she spoke. I didn't think she would actually do something like this. Anger slowly replaced the numbness inside my chest. All those years, all the time she had twisted the truth, and tonight she had gone so far that I lost my home. The girl hesitated for a moment before speaking again. You should come with me, she said. Where? To your house. I stared at her. Why? Because if what you're saying is true, then your parents deserve to hear the real story. Part of me wanted to refuse. After everything that had happened, the last place I wanted to go was back to that house. But another part of me knew something important. If I stayed silent, my sister's lie would become permanent, and I refused to let that happen. So, after a long pause, I nodded. The car ride back felt longer than the entire night. My heart beat harder with every street we passed. When we finally stopped in front of my house, the lights were still on. My family was awake. The door knocked. A few seconds later, my father opened it. The moment he saw me standing there, his face hardened. I told you to leave. But before he could close the door again, the girl stepped forward. Uncle, you need to hear something. My mother appeared behind him, confused. What's going on? The girl took a deep breath. Ladea didn't spread those secrets. My sister suddenly appeared in the hallway. The moment she saw who was standing outside, her expression changed. Just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Because your daughter was the one telling everyone herself. Silence filled the entire house. My father frowned. What are you talking about? The girl explained everything. The cafe, the conversation, the joke my sister had made about blaming me. Every word fell into the room like a stone. Slowly, my parents turned toward my sister. Her face had turned pale. That's not true, she whispered. But this time, no one immediately believed her. My father's voice was low and dangerous. Is it? My sister looked around nervously. For the first time in years, her tears didn't come. And without those tears, her story suddenly looked very weak. My mother stepped closer to her. Answer your father. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then finally, my sister broke. Her voice cracked. I didn't think they would kick her out. Those words were all my parents needed. The truth had finally come out. My father slowly turned toward me. His face looked completely different now. Not angry, not cold, just shocked and filled with regret. Ladea, he said softly, but I raised my hand gently, stopping him, because in that moment I realized something very important. The truth had cleared my name, but it hadn't erased the memory of the door closing in my face, or the way they had believed a lie without even listening to me. I told you I didn't do it, I said quietly. No one spoke. My mother wiped tears from her face. My father looked like he wanted to say 1,000 things. But the truth is, some moments break trust in ways that apologies cannot repair. After a long silence, my father finally said softly, "You can come back inside." I looked at the house one last time. The same house where I had grown up. The same house that had thrown me out without a second thought. And for the first time in my life, I made a decision for myself. I think I'll build a new home instead. And then I turned around and walked away. Not as the girl who had been blamed for someone else's lie, but as someone who had finally learned her worth. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't hurting the people who betrayed you,